Hey, y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the panel for Working While Black, the past, present, and future of Black labor. We are
Woo!
really excited for this conversation with y'all. We're really excited for this to be taking place in 2021, Black History Month, with some really, really brilliant Black leaders. Um, so I'll start. I'll introduce myself. My name is Layla Noor. I use pronouns both she, her, and he, him flexibly. I'm the senior campaign strategist for coworker.org, and I'm based in Durham, North Carolina.
Awesome. What is up, everybody? Look at this face. I just looking like a Black Brady Bunch. I just love it. I'm Courtney Malone. I am the Director of Leadership Development and Training at coworker.org, and I am from Motown, better known as Detroit, Michigan. And I'm
Hey.
just really, really excited to be here with all of you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So really quick, I will give an overview on our panelists, and I'll pass it back to Courtney to give an overview on the org. So today we're going to be in conversation about the past, present, and future of Black labor. And we're having this conversation with some really amazing leaders in Black space. So we have Tanya Wallace Goburn, who's the executive director at the National Black Worker Center. We have Lawrence Humphrey, who is a tech worker and founder of Tech Can Do Better. And we've got Allison Jones, who's vice president of brand and storytelling for Common Future. We're really excited about pulling back the curtains a little bit on the magic that happens when brilliant Black folks get together and talk about our experiences. So we can't wait.
Cannot wait. And then, I'm sure some of you are wondering, well, what is Coworker? Coworker is a multiracial organization fighting for the collective liberation of working people. We're a digital first organization, and we support workers organizing with folks who are often outside of the traditional union organizing context. We were founded almost 9 years ago by two women with deep roots in organized labor, Michelle Miller and Jess Kutch. We do this in a couple of ways: through our own petition platform, through relational organizing, coaching, leadership development, and support models. And we support working people fighting for and leading change across industry types, across sectors, and across geography.
Mm-hmm.
We're really excited to let you know, too, how you can participate today. You know what's going on. Now we want to share with you how to engage, and we want to invite Marley Pulido.
Hey.
Hey, everybody. I'm Marley Pulido, Director of Worker Resources and Training at coworker.org, and your chat moderator for the day. I don't know about everybody, but I'm super excited about this conversation in hopes that we can, better understand the future of Black labor, the future of Black people as workers, and
Mm-hmm.
the urgency to start building that future right now. I know that we would have loved to have this event in person. So let's try to channel that energy into Zoom. Uh, and there's a couple of ways that folks joining us from wherever you're joining can participate. At the bottom of the screen, there's two buttons that would help us have a better experience. And these are the chat and the Q&A. When commenting on the chat, make sure that the blue box is set to panelists and participants instead of just panelists. Send us all the pluses, the comments, emojis, and all the love and appreciation you want to share with us. And you also have the Q&A. And this is a separate feature to submit questions for our panelists. So if you want us to read your questions at the end, please send them in the Q&A section so we can keep it organized. And if you want, to vote for some of the questions, also feel free to do it. We'll try to answer them at the end. Also, please be respectful when engaging with us on the chat. This is a sacred space for us. We received some problematic messages from people who didn't feel like Black people should have a space to talk about these issues. So you're welcome here, but also respect panelists because we will remove folks who are not, showing love. At the bottom of the screen, you also have closed captioning for anybody who needs it. Take it away, Leila.
Thank you, Marley. So yeah, we're really excited. We're really looking forward to a lot of engagement in the chat, and a lot of really good questions from y'all in the Q&A. And just so y'all know what questions to ask, we're going to go ahead and move it on to our panel. So first panelist we have is Tanya Wallace-Goburn. So Tanya Wallace is the executive director of the National Black Worker Center. Born and raised in Chicago, right? Moved south in the early 90s. To launch your organizing career around empowering women and people of color. And something that I really liked that you said was in those early days, you learned an important lesson that we don't rise by the goodwill of others, we rise when we stand. So Tanya, please tell us a little bit more about you. Tell us about you and tell us about the National Black Worker Center.
Sure, well, love that you mentioned that I'm from Chicago, Courtney. Love that you're from Detroit, so the Midwest is in the house.
That's right.
Represent.
You know, and what I learned when I first started organizing is why people tend to organize, right? There's this belief that that people will do the right thing, that people will rise, that their morals, that their religion, that there's something will call people to save you. Right. And that's not the reality. That's not the way that our world works. Right. And so what I learned in those early days is that you rise when you stand up. That's how you get the monkey off of your back. You got to shake them off. You got to fight them off. You got to beat them off. And that's what, you know, that's how you got to brush them off. Right. And that's the moment that I think that we all eventually come to, right, when we realize that the power that we seek is the power that we have. And it's ours for the taking. And that began my history of organizing. I started in the South, as you mentioned earlier, because I wanted to organize Black people, Black women, people of color. And that led me to organizing in the clothing and textile industry. And what was interesting when I was organizing within the labor movement that I realized is that the more that I rose in that career, the further I got away from being and organizing people of color, because there just weren't a lot of, you know, Black and brown people, and definitely not a lot of women in leadership positions with the unions at that time. And so after, you know, when Black Lives Matter first started, I found myself in a position that I've been in frequently with other organizations. And that was when I was arguing with, you know, white people, basically to say, this is what's going on. We need to be talking about something. We need to be doing something. We need to be addressing the needs of our membership, which was predominantly people of color. And having my opinions being tossed to the side, having people feel that that they knew what was best for my community, and me just saying, you know, enough of that. I want to spend the rest of my working days, you know, working in service with Black people. And that's what led me to come to the National Black Worker Center and find my home and just my joy. And so the National Black Worker Center, thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. You know, the National Black Worker Center is a network of 8 Black worker centers across the country, and we exist to end racism and discrimination in the workplace. It's just that simple. So just happy to be here and happy to share our work.
Look, there's something that there was so much, right? So many gems. Something in particular that I was feeling when you were talking about like labor spaces not being open to Black leadership, Black women leadership, the history of that. And that just makes me want to ask, like, and give you some space to talk about why worker centers, like why Black worker centers are so vital in this space when we talk about labor organizing. And there's like a long history there. I don't know if people know, like the first one was founded like 40 years ago in the South, in North Carolina. There's such a rich history. And I just, you know, I want to just make some space for you to acknowledge that. Like, why do you think Black worker centers are so critical?
That's right. Yeah. So first and foremost, shout out to the Black Workers for Justice. They were started in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. and they have been holding it down for all of us since 1981. So shout out to them. They're doing awesome work and continue to do awesome work. And when I think about the origins of Black Worker Centers, what comes to my mind is what was true then is still true today. And that is where you live and how much money you're able to earn are both tied to the color of your skin. And that's why Black Worker Centers exist. When we think about those early days in the 1980s, what we saw was businesses moving from the North to the South, running from unions and looking for a workforce that they could exploit, right? And to contribute to this race to the bottom, right? This race to pay people as little as possible, this race to dehumanize workers. And we see that race continuing today, right? And so, you know, for people who don't have a background with organized labor or unions, and why this was so key for so many businesses and still is, right? We see businesses leaving now the country to get away from unions and, you know, looking for the next group of workers that they could exploit and pay slave wages to. But the difference when you have a union is basically wrapped into the power of a union contract, right? And it's that contract that the employees have with the employer that stops the employer's right to pay people for less, right? You've heard about right to work laws and right to work states. It's basically saying that the employer has the right to pay you less, but the way that it's worded, it makes you feel like you have some kind of rights, but you actually don't.
Right, it's like a right to get fired, basically.
That's exactly right, for any kind of reason.
Right.
That's right. Like the union contract also ends wage theft and discrimination against wage discrimination. So there historically unions have been a way for Black people to even enter into the middle class, right? It's a way that a lot of people were able to send their kids to college and to schools. It meant that you had, in addition to livable wages and gainful employment and secure jobs, it meant that you had access to healthcare and benefits and a retirement plan. And, you know, businesses didn't want that, right? They want to keep those monies for themselves and their shareholders. And so left the North, to move to the South to look for, you know, this workforce that they could, to exploit. And the good news is that Black people are resourceful. And even in the absence of having a union, there were people who knew what those benefits were and knew that we could do better. And so they started Black Worker Centers.
Ooh. That was probably the best lead up to the necessity for Black Worker Centers that I've ever heard. That was so right now you said there's six across the country?
They're eight.
And what cities are y'all based in?
Sure. So we are in, as I mentioned, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. So throughout North Carolina, in New Orleans, Mississippi, Chicago, LA, Oakland, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. Yes, on the spot. But you know, that was just a quick plug, because if there's folks that are on here from those areas, I want them to be able to immediately hop on there and find y'all. So back to what you were saying, Tanya. Now, thinking about where we are now, right? 2020 was a whole decade by itself. There's all types of jokes about this, and we all know it. 2020 was somehow 1 year and 10 years in one, in terms of the level of stress and trauma and just economic crisis, right? So now thinking about the challenges that Black folks have historically faced, how do you see that replicated, or how do you see that still playing out now during an economic crisis, during, you know, quote unquote racial unrest? I hate to even say that because it sounds like this thing that is so time specific when we all know how long that's been going on. But what kind of challenges do you see? Right. What kind of historical challenges do you see kind of carried on that Black workers should be aware of?
Yeah, 2020 was definitely a defining year for racial injustice in America. And I think about my grandfather when he would talk about the Great Depression, and he said that the Great Depression was just an opportunity for the rest of America to see how the other America was living. And I'm always reminded of that when I think about, these two pandemics that collided, which was systemic racism and COVID-19. The list is so long in terms of how this has been, and COVID has been impacting Black workers. We know that Black folks and their families were already economically insecure before the pandemic tore through the United States. And, Black folks are hit first and worst by the economic forces that create and perpetuate this inequality.
Exactly.
And so, because our workforce is targeted for this supply of skilled workers who can be employed by low wages, we just got it hit side to side, front to back, left and right. And some of those ways are, that 18.8% of Black women lost their jobs between February and April of 2020. And if you want to put that into some kind of context, at 45.5%, white women have not seen such a low share of the population with job loss since the late 1970s.
Wow.
Black workers are more likely to be in frontline jobs that are categorized as essential, forcing them to risk their own and their family's health to earn a living. Black Americans make up 12.5% of the population, but account for 22.4% of COVID deaths. Blacks are far more likely to be unemployed than white workers at every level of education during COVID. Black workers are less likely to have paid sick days, and they're less likely to be able to work from home than other workers. Black families have significantly less cash reserves to draw upon than white families, meaning that, they suffer financially at a faster rate. African Americans and Blacks in particular have higher rates of chronic illnesses that are associated with greater vulnerability to COVID-19. So asthma, diabetes, hypertension, the gambit of it all. Black workers are 60% more likely to be uninsured than white workers. Black workers and their families, risk greater exposure to the coronavirus because they're more likely to live in densely populated housing.
Yeah.
Black workers are twice as likely to live in households also with 3 or more generations than white workers. And so the list just goes on and on and on in terms of how we have been impacted and why it's so necessary for us to organize and to fight to make sure, right, that we get the protections that we need, that we get the security that we need, and that we are not silent while this pandemic kills our community.
I just want to if we can, just take a minute because we don't get a lot of minutes. So let's just take a minute to let the reality of those stats, because those are not that's statistics, but that's all people's lived experiences. Let's just let that just wash over us for a second. The disparity, the alarming disparity. And also it was the listing of the stats for me, because shout out to Black women for having the stats, but also just like, I just gotta exhale.
It's
I just
heavy.
gotta exhale. And
because you kind of, Courtney, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it makes you,
please.
it's like, how do we even, in light of this, how are we even here on this panel today when there's so much, there's so many attacks and bombs coming our way every day?
The
I
resilience.
just have to say, like that, in the chat, I want to shout out that in addition to, and excuse me for not mentioning, that we have 6 Black worker centers that are incubating right now. And I saw folks from Philly and Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are also on here. So don't want to miss out on listing out the folks across the country, because people are building power as we speak right now in light of, and it even in, irregardless of the pandemic, people are still fighting and building power for Black workers.
That's and this is a moment right here. So right, we could have done something very, typical, talking about the past, and we could have given y'all a laundry list of facts. We wanted to really make this really clear about what's distinctly different and critical about Black people organizing in the labor context and what that feels like and what that looks like.
Mhm.
And honestly, whether it's the worker centers, Tanya, whether it is where you were before then, is you think about, such a rich history because of our resilience up against all of these facets. You think about, this rich history of us fighting for stronger working conditions, being able to just thrive and live our lives. Leading into the future, we got new centers that are incubating, centers that have been holding strong for almost 40 years.
Mhm.
What lessons, what's coming up for you? What lessons from this rich history of Black labor organizing are most alive for you as you plan for the future,
Mhm.
or as we are planning for the future?
That's right. That's right. It's because it certainly is a we thing.
Mhm.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition of power was the ability to achieve purpose and affect change. And that's what I carry with myself when I think about what we are building and what we are moving towards. It's that ability to achieve purpose and affect change so that we have power. We
Mhm.
know that and believe in the power of creating spaces, safe spaces where Black people can come together to that are free from racist attacks and strategize to expand legal protections, to create anti-racist policies and campaigns, to build collective power through organizing. That's our theory of change, and
Yeah.
we know that works, right? And it's really just creating that space and that freedom that is safe to allow people to express themselves and utilize their talents, right? And for me, that means really understanding that there is a leader in all of us, right? We're not waiting on a particular savior, that we are the leaders that we have been waiting for. One of the things that I learned early on in my career is when people make that decision to fight. And oftentimes it's when their back is against the wall and when they're not comfortable. And certainly, if there was ever a time, that is this moment that we are living in right now. The
Yeah.
other thing that I know for certain is that when you have to, is when the decision to lead comes into play. It doesn't come into play when you have that job or when you have that career or when you have a particular salary. Like that decision to lead and to fight happens before any of that comes into play. And that's when you are the most boldest. That's when you are the most courageous. If you wait until you have the career, the salary, the whatever, it's too late. That's when people don't stand up because they're afraid that they're going to lose something, right? And so our goal is to focus on organizing those who don't have a voice. We think about this assessment of the ones, the twos, and the threes, right? The ones are the folks that are on this call right now or this chat right now who are in agreement with what I'm saying, who have lived it and experienced it. The threes are the folks who maybe don't agree and don't get it. But the twos, that's our sweet spot. The twos are the people who maybe registered to vote because somebody asked them to, but they never did vote, or they haven't voted. They're the people that are working two jobs. They're unemployed. They're underemployed. They are struggling to make ends meet. That is our sweet spot. Having conversations, building and supporting the leadership of those individuals, because those are the people who hold the power, I believe, and who will help us to achieve true liberation and dismantle the structural racism that we all find ourselves surrounded by now.
Ooh. Ooh.
First of
You
all,
are too
that's a wrap.
kind.
Let's just go. This is done. Let's go. Tanya, ma'am, that we are the leaders we've been waiting for. That just laid me. That laid me. I mean, everything you said laid me. But also, like, one thing that, especially as someone who has, you know, my political history is in grassroots organizing, I could just feel the organizer in you. Like, I am deeply inspired by you. I'm deeply inspired by how uh, empowered you are and how that inspires me to feel empowered. And also this model of like the ones, the twos, the threes, the twos is a sweet spot. I was like, oh, this is absolutely an organizer. So there's so much more goodness. There's so much more brilliance that we could be talking about. And I'm really excited for us to get through it. Thank you so much, Tanya. We're going to bring you back on. We're going to bring Tanya back on when we're doing our Q&A section at the end. Tanya Wallace Goburn, Executive Director of the National Black Worker Center, y'all. Give it up wherever you're at. Talking about the past of Black labor and what we want to move towards the future with. We're so grateful. Thank you so much, Tanya.
Yes, yes. Awesome. And I am hippopotamus happy and peacock proud to introduce our next panelist. Our next panelist is Lawrence Humphrey. Lawrence has an obsession for stories and systems in both contemplation and creation. This brother has a BS in computer science to AI design, and most recently has been doing some design consulting at IBM. This brother is also extending his work outside of IBM, where he's using those skills to address rampant systemic inequity. In June, he and others co-founded Tech Can Do Better, pushing for equitable, measurable, and enforceable policy changes across the tech industry that directly affect present and future Black employees. We are so excited to talk to you, Lawrence, about the present and what you have been up to.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. You set me up having me follow Tanya, though. I gotta say, did me dirty.
Oh man, I mean, we did. No.
It's a lot of brilliance in this Zoom screen. You know, we see it. You got the books, you got the BS. You're ready. You're ready, brother. You're ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us about you, Lawrence. Tell us about you. Tell us about Tech Can Do Better.
Yeah. So Courtney kind of spilled the beans a little bit, but I've always been obsessed with technology from a very early age. I've been a tinkerer, and that led me to get my undergrad in computer science, and it obviously led me into the tech industry. And an undercurrent and a through current was I was always extremely mindful of the Black experience and how we can giving back. I think that it's a through line. I've been talking about it, reflecting on it a lot, because this is Black History Month and contemplation with some of my team. But it's that our existence is for giving to other people's existence and for bettering people's lives. So it was only a matter of time before those different components of my life intersected. And tech is the industry that I know. That's my home. That's where I live. That's where I have some clout. And I see all of the opportunity that tech has given me. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to pay that forward. And, that all came to a head in the aftermath of George Floyd being murdered, when there was a bigger cultural awakening. And tech was one of those industries, not dissimilar to the rest, where they were like, what do we do? We stand in solidarity. What is it that we do? And I and some others decided to use that moment to capitalize on what felt like the biggest window of making systemic change. Mm-hmm. And all of the big tech companies, from big, small, across different sectors, all were making proclamations of change. And we decided to say, hey, if you want to look, you're all ears, we're all words. So let's make something happen. And ultimately, it is about, it comes from a place of positive intent. And I'm sure we'll touch on this, and even anecdotally, I see within so many of my peers, so many of my friends, so many of my coworkers and colleagues, and I can fathom that this is just the case, near universally, that people want to do the right thing, but don't know what to do. And this paralysis is what leads to this stagnation of seeing the status quo. So Tech Can Do Better is all about giving people that actionable feedback. But yeah, it's Tech Can Do Better was the byproduct of my tech industry passion, racial equity passion, and I mean the rest is history. So
Mm.
Yeah, the rest is history and the rest is now.
yeah, it's not. I mean, the rest is future, I guess. Is it? The
Okay,
rest is
yeah.
ahead of us.
Yeah, they got the ears, you got the words. I heard that. I heard that. So here we could go a lot of places. We could
Mhm.
go a lot of places. So let's give the people a little sample of what's up. This first question, in this age of app-based employment and loose regulations on tech companies, right? There's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of organizing around like tech. How do you see, and how does Tech Can Do Better see the role and responsibility of this industry in the experience of Black people working? And this is working in the industry, working outside. Where do you all sit on that?
Yeah, I mean, in full transparency, I don't come from the world of organizing. I come from just tech, right? So, and I have an intuition for doing the right thing. I think that people call doing the right thing different labels, but with respect to, tech industry and advocating for the Black employee, my perspective is it's made a ton of people extremely rich. It's given a lot of people a ton of access. It has, without exaggeration, changed this world. We are having this call all because of some elaborate network of different technologies, right? So it, and when I think about one of the most jarring metrics as to how different demographics are doing, that racial wealth gap is one of those metrics that it's pretty disgusting, 10 times over. And with tech and with the systemic, let's say, inaccess for some demographics, it's only going to widen that number, which correlates to all different other qualities of life and access. And I mean, you can't claim to have equity when someone's living up here and someone's living down here, and that's only widening. So where I see tech's place in that ecosystem is this is one of the most impactful in the industries that we've ever seen. And it's about pulling everyone up in the same capacity, in an equitable capacity. So, and that includes the Black worker, and that includes creating an ecosystem where they are not only included, obviously, but they can flourish as well. And I believe that a lot of life is dictated by these loops and these feedback loops. And this is one of those loops where once we get it right, and once we see that, and we're kind of seeing it in other demographics. So women, for instance, they're coming into the workplaces and rising up, coming in and rising up. And I mean, the same is true for when you bring in people of color and Black folks that come in and rise up, and they bring in more Black folks and they come in and rise, and it just becomes equitable for everyone. So I think that tech, with its outsized power in today's reality and society, they have an outsized responsibility for catering to all of the different populations.
Yes, with outsized power comes outsized responsibility.
Okay.
So you brought up equity, right? I think that's actually a really good one. So companies have been talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion for a long time, but why are they still failing so badly? Like Lawrence, what's missing? What is it? Why don't companies get the urgency or the mechanics of actually implementing DEI, diversity?
Well, look, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't have the answer. I have Lawrence's answer.
I love it. Let's hear Lawrence's answer.
So one is the one that I alluded to, and this is all based on the assumption, and obviously I haven't crunched the numbers necessarily, but I've already seen it to be true time and time again, of people wanting to do the right thing but not knowing what the right thing to do is, right? So there is the inaction by the people who mean well. Moreover, I think that there is not a strong enough system of accountability, and that the checks and balances don't exist, or they exist very loosely, such that the people in power aren't being held to the responsibility that power affords them. in essence. And I think that, like I said, those feedback loops, that power begets more power, which perpetuates that cycle. And then, you know, that's like the cynical approach as well. I think that's also just the practical reality that people who have power want to hold on and hoard that power, and that maintains power. But also, I think that kind of in between of that, assuming positive intent and systems of accountability, is that there are a lot of folks who are fearful of, and when we ran our Tech Can Do Better community meetings, we ask a variation of this question, but ostensibly there is a blocker preventing people from speaking very candidly and precisely about race, because it's such a supercharged topic, such that a lot of people do fear that they're going to have backlash for, despite doing the right thing, I'm going to get chastised for it, I'm going to get slapped on the hand, I'm discouraged from talking about it. And as with anything, you can't fix it unless you can speak very precisely about the nature of the problem. So, you know, even in terms of language, you know, personally, like people of color versus Black folks, like who needs the help in the company? I mean, yes, Black folk, like people of color need help, but look, hire more Black folks. We're all struggling. So, or we, the royal, we in the tech industry, the numbers are dwindling. It's problematic. So we, even just speaking precisely about it and the fear of doing so and facing backlash, I think keeps a lot of people from doing the right thing. So that's that in between answer of that reality.
100%. And I think like you started to talk about it, and this is where I want to know, it's where I want to lean in the most, is like, so because of this reality of like people knowing better but not knowing how to do it, and because of like lack of strong system, you know, these loose systems of accountability, and really, you know, skating over, that's what I hear you saying, people skating over the reality of like, we are not a monolith people of color. There are Black people who are working in your industry who need things. There are folks who are navigating the caste system who need things. And there are folks who need specific things. Based on all of that, like, what can workers do? And I think the better question is, what are y'all up to? How are Black tech working people coming together at Tech Can Do Better and saying, enough.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's our claim to fame, but like our signature project was that our Achieving Equity in Tech document, and it reads like a white paper. I jokingly, in some company, call it our black paper, but it outlines the different asks that people either at the upper echelons of the company, at the, you know, the more associates and junior people and middle managers, everyone has a responsibility and can be doing something to instrument change. And, you know, at the topmost level, obviously, if you're an executive, you can just set the pace. You can bring in, you can hire that Black executive or that Black female executive, or anyone in a marginalized or underrepresented group. You can create those broad sweeping changes.
Right.
But if you're like most other people, if you're a worker, you know, someone like me, for instance, you can have a voice in terms of, I mean, if you're in tech, and obviously I know tech, so I can only speak from my experience. If you have a product that you're doing research on and you need to validate with users, making sure that your users are diverse, making sure that if you are collaborating on your team and you don't have the voices you need, reaching across to another team and saying, hey, can I get your eyes on something? I had a coworker, and I respect the hell out of her for this. She's a white woman, and in the aftermath of George Floyd, she started up weekly calls every Friday of talking about how systemic racism materializes or manifests across society. So, I mean, this is obviously using work hours to talk about systemic racism. And, you know, that ranged from the spectrum of systemic racism in healthcare and housing, the racial wealth gap. I mean, we talked about in tech, and I led that one. And one of the meta realizations that we had is one of the most densely diverse places that we consistently cohabit is our workplace. You know, you go to your homes, it's pretty homogenous on average. Your neighborhoods are pretty homogenous. Your religious institutions, your friend groups are pretty homogenous, broad sweeping. And the workplace is when we're all get to meet up, people of different walks of life. So taking some of your time while you have such a diverse audience to talk about the tough issues. And I mean, she set the precedent of saying, hey, these are the ways that I perpetuate racism. I'm not happy for it. I've grown. And obviously she was a nervous wreck, but
Shout out
she
to
set the
her.
precedent. Yeah, shout out to one of my
Right,
favorite
though.
people, love her to death. And I think that just that level of vulnerability and, you know, just
Mhm.
really, and, you know, they talk about allies and advocates, but taking that fight for as her own, right? So
Mm.
she not putting the burden on me to instigate that conversation or initiate it, said that we're going to talk about this in the workplace. And I
Mm.
mean, I think that that's something that anyone can do, junior, senior, middle managers. If you have headcount, hire a Black person, release or balance the salaries on your team such that, I mean, it sounds obvious, white men get paid the same as Black women and everyone in between. So I think that everyone has a role to play. And for that, if you want more granularities, I would just refer to
Mhm.
our Achieving Equity in Tech document. And if you agree with what you see, sign it.
It
That's
does
right.
sound so simple. It does sound so simple. Equal it
Yeah.
out. It looks like someone actually just went ahead and dropped the link for the Black papers. Yeah, Michelle Miller dropped the link for the Black paper, which is great. We've got one more question for you,
Yeah,
Lawrence, before
yeah.
we roll on here.
Yeah.
We've got just a few minutes left before we dive into the last section. So thinking about your work, as you said, you're not an organizer. You're coming from a very different perspective. But then you did go ahead and start Tech Can Do Better, right? To organize or at least call people to this higher demand of like do right kind of action.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about your work right now, thinking about the future of tech, which is just, I mean, it's transforming every second, I feel like. What lessons are you taking into the future of Black work? What are you hopeful for?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hopeful for, and I alluded to it earlier, that in my lifetime, I have never seen so many people so eager to make systemic change and race being talked about from the topmost level, such that I think that there was floating around on the internet a while ago of a Google, like a spreadsheet of every tech company that made some public statement about addressing racial inequity. I mean, the big CEOs, executives, boards of directors, people redirecting funding and how venture capitalism gets allocated. Like, this is being talked about everywhere now. You can't ignore it. And maybe a year ago, a conversation like this one would have been taboo, or it might have been like, oh, Black folks are doing Black stuff and talking Black stuff. It's like, we have people's attention now. And
right.
I am hopeful of capitalizing and making something happen off of all of this I want to say still potential and kinetic energy of bottling that all up and getting some distance out of it. So I am hopeful for the people keeping the fight alive, even though it's really hard. And, you know, one of the things that I've been contemplating a lot lately is that I think that we all expect, in order to achieve these big, you know, systemic, insanely huge Goliath outcomes, it takes huge effort. But it's like, no, it takes a little bit of effort from a lot of people. And it ultimately, I don't think it materially makes our lives look materially that different. It's just these small changes that go such a long way.
Right.
And seeing that, you know, 1% gain or 1% input multiplied up exponentially. Once people start to see that, and I mean, we're seeing it in the most morbid of ways with the pandemic, of a handful of people shutting down and crippling the whole ecosystem, the whole world. Imagine that, but channeled for good, right? So
the bars.
I just
handful.
Okay, and I believe in the power of manifestation. So we can't do what we can't see. So I just want everybody on this call, all 100 of you, to see that. See what's possible. If a few can tear it down, a few can build it up. I love that. I love that, Lawrence. I just want to, as we're closing this out, this is just a couple of things that are coming up for me. Is one, just the example of like, one, your industry can do more and should do more. Moreover, You as an individual, you don't have to be an organizer. You don't have to have this career in this. I'm really inspired by someone who would like this. Actually, this is just where I work, and I think that people should do right. So I'm going to organize with me and my folks. Me and my folks are going to come together, and we're going to try to demand that in this space, and we're going to take up that space. I'm just feeling really inspired by your example, by taking you better in what you've been up to. I want to thank you so much. This is not the last that we'll see of you. I hope y'all have questions. I see some stuff about transparent pay. Talk about your pay at work. Yes, we're excited to talk about all of it, but we're going to keep it moving. Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Thank you, Lawrence. I am so excited to introduce our last panelist. Ma'am, listen, Allison Jones from Common Future. Okay, let me go ahead and hit them with a little bit of bio, Allison. So Allison Jones is a Brooklyn girl living in the Bay Area who's passionate about creating a world where people of color thrive and shine. Moment of silence. In a time when some people may want to keep their heads down, Allison's job as Common Future's Vice President of Brand and Storytelling is to inspire them to stand up, a common theme that we're also hearing here. So she does this by creating story-driven, actionable content and campaigns to paint a vibrant, equitable future that can only come to fruition if everyone takes collective responsibility towards creating it.
Yeah, anytime we start talking about the future and the future for Black people, I'm getting chills.
It's so hopeful and it's so exciting. And so I'm so deeply looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I think we can just start by just giving you a chance to just expound on that and build on that. Tell these folks not only like what Common Future is all about, because that's a whole thing in and of itself, but what is motivating you to take this on?
Oh, yeah. So, the thing, particularly when it comes to storytelling, right? Stories are reflections of the narrative of what is acceptable and what's possible. So when I work to make sure that the stories of the people that we support are getting attention, that people understand them, and I'll get more into what Common Future does so you can get that picture. I'm not just doing it to make you feel good. I'm doing it so that folks can stop saying things like, oh, I don't know what people are doing. I don't know what's possible.
Right.
Do people really care about these things? They absolutely do. Right. And they're working on it. And I think so much of, and storytelling has obviously played so much of a role in movement building and in history and in our culture. And so, it's not, like I said, it's not just about, and I came into this work because I like talking to us. I like knowing what we're doing. I like elevating the work that we're doing, the ideas that we have, really driving home the point that what the other panelists have made, that solutions are not outside of us or outside of our community, they're in it. And so my job is to elevate it and make sure people hear it. And so I'll give folks a little background about Common Future as well. Yeah.
I'm trying so hard not to make a stank face for folks that may not understand what that's rooted in, but it's really rooted in shock and joy. I'm just like, man, but go ahead, keep going.
I mean, I feel very lucky that I get to do this kind of work, and part of that work being in community with all of you. So I really do feel lucky, and I appreciate the space to just talk about how I landed this work.
We're grateful you are doing the work. So tell us about it.
All right, so Common Future. So our vision is a future where people, no matter their race or ethnicity, have power, choice, and ownership over the economy, right? And so one of the things we do to kind of build this future is we advocate for and invest in a network of about 200 folks who are working across the country, building equitable approaches to entrepreneurship, asset, and business ownership as ways to build wealth. So let me give you an example of what that means, right? So let's say there's a business and the business owner retires. They might close the business or sell it to another individual. We have folks saying, why not sell it to the employees? Why not let them own this business, right?
Why not?
Working with businesses on that sort of employee transition, right? Because there's power in that kind of ownership, right? And so we'll work with someone like that. And because we're like, you're doing the work, you know what your community needs. What do you need to make it happen, right?
Mhm.
And we've been doing this work for about 20 years. And one of the things we realize is that so much of it is structural issues. It's being shut out of capital. It's people not taking your ideas seriously. It's decisions being made about you at the policy level, at the funding level, without actually taking into consideration what you need as you serve your community, as you help them, buy businesses, buy land, start businesses, whatever it might be. And so we do this for it. Like, we give capital, we give support, we give community, but then we say, all right, now we got to make sure other people do the stuff too, right? So we'll
Right.
take this information, we'll take this knowledge, we'll take these insights, and we, a large part of what we've been doing is like, we'll go to funders and philanthropy and say, you're not giving enough money. You know what I mean? You're not giving enough money, and here's how we can help you do that. But it's
Bringing
really
it.
about pushing people to think about how they move capital and think about who they center when they're doing policies. And because, like I said earlier, what we're really trying to confront is the idea that we don't know what to do, that solutions are beyond our reach, or that people who have the solutions are outside of our community, right? So we don't, the issue is that they're not getting invested in, they're not getting the attention that they deserve. There's a lot of hand wringing when we need to just double down and focus on the folks who are doing the work.
Ma'am, I love it because also it's that feeling of, especially as I feel like as someone who is in political work, or like, yes, I want to organize my people, as Lawrence was saying, like, ultimately the core is like, I want people to do right. I want people to do good. I want people to do right. But sometimes, a lot of times, especially after a year like 2020, it's kind of hard to see that long vision. It almost feels unattainable, right? It's just like, when does it ever shift? When does it ever end? And so I think also part of the just like deep joy that I feel about the work that y'all do is I'm like, oh, actually the future, it's possible and it's happening right now.
Yes.
It's happening right now. The future is happening now. And that is really, really exciting. So like, so we have this question for you about, I feel like initially we really came out the park and we were like, we're really going to hit Allison with a lot of questions. We're going to keep it chill. But I do want to ask you, in terms of generating wealth, right? In terms of feeding back into the community, what could that, what does that mean for Black people in this country to just have that unlocked, the ability to generate wealth?
So I remember when we were doing prep for this, right? And I think when you asked me, my first thought was a feeling, right? The feeling of breathing easier, right? Because part of it, and the reason why that comes up is, what does wealth mean? What does it enable? And what does the lack of it do to us, right? And I think Lawrence touched on the wealth gap earlier. And Black folks are 13% of the population, but we have about 2% of this nation's wealth, right? And wealth is home, assets, real estate, stocks, bonds, all that stuff that accumulates value and you can pass on, right? And the reason why this matters is because wealth acts as a buffer at times to instability and to shocks, right? You can weather a storm if you've got some assets more than you can weather a storm if you don't have them, right? And it can be passed on to generations. And so it's a material change in our lives. It's a kind of stability that I don't think we've ever had here, that we've ever known. And so when you ask the question, my first, there was this meme going around on Twitter, unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, have a sip of water. You know what I mean? When you ask that question, that's what I did. I was like, oh, yeah. What would it look like if you lost your job and you had assets? What would it look like if the businesses were collectively owned? What would it feel like? What would it feel? Oh, just,
Speak it.
Yeah, because we hustle hard, just trying to keep it together. And I want us to breathe easy. I want us to breathe easy, get some rest.
Okay. So, but there's something like real special about like how it's manifesting at like Common Future. And I'm curious, to have Black folks, Black CEO, Black VP of brand and storytelling, to have Black folks leading charge.
Yeah.
What in your mind, like why is that one like uniquely important. And
Mhm.
what does that sort of hint at for us about like how to scale this kind of stuff? Like who needs to be in the driver's seat and why?
I mean, it's so funny because we were really just talking about this as a staff, what it means to be a people of color-led organization. A lot of Black folks in positions of leadership, myself, the CEO, and some other folks we've recently hired, in terms of what it represents. Again, we want to walk the walk. We want to talk the talk. We don't just want to talk. We want to walk the walk. So if we're saying we want Black folks to lead things or be in charge of things, we have to show folks kind of what that could look like, right? And how to embody that. But that comes with its own set of challenges. And I think one of the things we're wrestling with, or one of the things we were talking about, is how do we tell that part of our story too? Because what we've been focusing on is really about, this is the great work our community is doing. This is the great work that these folks are doing. And we're getting questions like the one you just asked me, but how are y'all doing? How did y'all get here? And I think that's something we want to unpack more, because it particularly for, a lot of nonprofits, we are a nonprofit, it isn't common. It isn't common at all. The leadership is not very diverse. Organizations themselves are not diverse, but the leadership is not diverse. And I think we could do a lot of good in telling people how we got here, for sure. So I really appreciate that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, so in thinking about this, right, not only being transparent, because I think that's so real, like being transparent about our experience, our journey to coming into positions of leadership. I saw something recently from a Black author whose book I just got. It's like some sci-fi stuff, but what I appreciated was on her website, she was just laying out how she got there. Just like, here's what I did. Here's how I got my agent. Here's how I unlocked this. And I'm just like, this type of info sharing is so important. And that's a form of just like investment that is just so public and so freely giving, that is really beautiful. So thinking about that, like separately, but investment, like, what do you feel like is possible when we invest in Black working people and Black leadership? Like long term, what do you imagine the impact of your work is going to be on Black communities at a scale?
Yeah. And, when I think particularly about investing in leadership, investing in our communities, generating wealth, making sure that we have ownership, right? I think the key thing is really a sense of ownership. Sometimes I'll say, historically, we've been locked out of wealth, we've been locked out of leadership, but the truth is it's been stolen from us, right? From our labor, land. This year is the 100-year anniversary of, the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? And so I bring these things up because and it sort of continues today, and the things that we not just don't have access to, but that are taken from us, right? And so when I think about long-term investment, right, what that actually means, if we're actually building this future that we want, what it actually looks like is that we've had some significant structural changes. That the things that we've changed our expectations around what's okay and what's not okay. We have different business structures. We have different expectations of institutions in our communities. It won't just be a matter of increasing numbers. And I think that that's important, but it also be, in order for these numbers to grow, in order for there to be a sense of ownership, that we need new rules. You know what I mean? We need new rules. We need new expectations, and that's what I think success will feel like, or what this long-term vision will be, right? It won't be, I have a very small example to share. So last year, it was PPP, the Paycheck Protection Loan, right? A lot of Black businesses were the last to receive them, or they didn't receive them at all, and were hardest hit by these things. In the future, that does not happen. In the future, there is no loan thing created without saying, how does this affect? Are they at the table? This can't roll out until we have all of these questions answered, because we end up doing this thing where people are left out and we keep playing catch up. So what it really looks like is, I keep going back to feeling. It feels like, in this way, I keep going back to feelings, but it feels like we are not playing catch up. or being afraid that something happened without our knowledge to us. Because I find that that happens with these big ideas sometimes. A lot of the mainstream ideas are very extractive. They aren't really made for us. We're not doing that. We're ready to go. We know this is gonna work for us. You know what I mean? So we're not playing catch up, and we don't have that fear. And that's what it really feels like. I keep going back to feelings because when life is different, we feel different. When we do have ownership, when our material conditions are equitable and just, we will feel different. We may love differently. You know what I mean? Who said our bodies know? Yes. So so yes, there's just a lot there, I think.
Our bodies do know. Our bodies do know. And what I love about the work is that it is not insular. It's not a thing that Common Future is building for itself. This is about communities owning. It's about ownership. And I hope y'all caught this trend about what we wanted to talk about the future is what can we own? And how does that help us thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think and my hope also is that when we talk about ownership, we talk about it, the energy around it sometimes is it's much more competitive than cooperative or restorative, and that's also what I want us to be. That's also what I would like to see done differently, right? Where it's not a zero-sum game. It's not if you started one, I can't start one, or I can't have. Like, I think even the language of ownership tends to have some negative weight to it. It's like we don't want power over anyone.
Right.
You know what I mean? We don't want to take things from folks. Ownership does not mean I have this, so now you don't. It means we've expanded the pie so that everyone has enough. And our approach to ownership recognizes that. So we're talking about policies and tactics and tips and ideas and stuff, but we're really talking about a complete shift in what we think is just for how we live and work.
Yes.
And so it's just,
So I know that Courtney's got to follow up because I saw it in the face. Don't even be that way. Don't even be that way. I know you got a good question. I'm gonna let you ask it. I just want to say that this piece around, like, we don't want power over, we want power with. I just feel like something like that, like, we are so conditioned to be individualistic. Chase my dream, get my money. I'm going to do me. I've got to look out for myself in order to get to the top. How many people do I have to climb on? Right. And I think what's so beautiful about the work that y'all are doing and what it's going to take to actually build a future that is safe and equitable for all people is actually a future of abundance. Right. And it's not whipping up abundance out of thin air. It's recognizing the abundance that already exists.
Yeah.
That, like, equity is a practice of abundance, right? It's a practice of moving out of scarcity. Like, I don't have to hoard all the things. I can be fulfilled, and you can be fulfilled at the same time from the same exact bucket. We can be getting our entire life from the same exact bucket. And I feel like that is, it's such a hard practice too, because I think that it's hard to get out of the mindset of, like, I got to do me. Let me look out for me. Let me try to get mine. When it's like, we've got to be a little bit counterintuitive of, like, in order for me to win, you got to win. In order for me to get mine, you got to get yours. In order for our community to be safe, in order for me to be safe, you have to be safe. Because I can't be safe out here if you don't feel safe, because you're going to bug out. And then I won't feel, it's like, we actually all have to be safe, and we've all got to be experiencing equity via abundance. So
I love that equity is a practice of abundance. Yes.
Layla, okay, bars are
right.
Now, listen, we got a couple minutes.
I just had to drop that gem in there.
I want to this idea, right? Equity is a practice of abundance. And it, like, future is right now. And this in the spirit of that, I just am curious, what's on your mind about folks? Because this model only works of, like, redistributing wealth and like working people owning the things and creating models of ownership that like are community driven,
Mhm.
what you want to leave with these folks? Like, what,
Whoa.
you know, how do,
Mm. You know, I would say there are a couple things. The first is the frame that we've established in this conversation of shifting how we look at things like ownership, like power. I think even starting there will change sort of how you even look at business, how you look at wealth, because it's no longer that individual approach, even sometimes seeps into how we try to build another world, right? We still view it as overly competitive. And so I think that's one part of it. The other part is like, join us as we kind of, you know what I mean? Go to this website, sign up for the newsletter. And I say that because one of the things we're trying to be more intentional about is a lot of folks that we work with tend to be in institutions, so like philanthropy, policy, that kind of stuff. But we want folks who are curious about this stuff to be part of this work too. We want to hear the questions, we want to hear the ideas, and so just join us and be part of our community.
yeah.
Allison, thank you so much for blessing us with your brilliance and your presence. This has been, I love dreaming about Black futures. It is the thing that keeps me holding on. And so it feels really great to do that. So we're really grateful for it. We're actually going to bring all of y'all back now. So we want to welcome back Tanya Wallace Gilburn. We want to welcome back Lawrence for the Q&A portion. So I'm really hoping, I'm looking at this Q&A bubble. It looks like we have a lot of juicy things. And I'm going to pass it over to Marley now. Thanks, y'all.
All the juice.
Yo, this is beautiful and powerful and a bunch of things. And I was just like off camera, just smiling here. Let me give me a couple seconds. But there's a question here that I think applies to the three of you, maybe in like different levels. And it's the idea that like, how do we get Black folks to get involved, or how do we get them to speak up?
I think that if I could take it on first and not directly, I'm still very much a designer at heart, and I like to play around with questions. I think the premise of that question is a little backwards. I mean, if you assume that addressing systemic racism was not created by Black folks. So is it our responsibility to address it and solve for it? So I think that if I can't answer that question directly without first answering, how do we get everyone to begin solving this problem as if it is their own problem, and it is, because this rising tide affects all ships. I was actually, one of my favorite thinkers, human beings of all time, is James Baldwin. And, he said that this nation and its success is, and I'm paraphrasing, inextricably tied to its treatment of the black person in this country. So I think that just that reckoning of how can I take this problem on and begin to address it, regardless of whether I'm Black, white, if I'm cisgendered, if I'm, whatever your background is, how can I begin advocating equity for all? And, in terms of how you speak out, I think it just takes someone doing it. I believe really heavily in that. The first follower, if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it, and they just need that first co-signature. So, and obviously it's easier said than done, but it just takes someone doing it.
So I want to jump in and follow after Lawrence. I totally agree with everything that he said. And I think that sometimes we make it harder than it has to be, right? Like, you wouldn't say, how do I get people to come have a drink with me tonight? Or how would I get somebody to come to my birthday party? You just ask them, right? You just start the conversation. I think about, any barbershop or beauty shop on a Saturday afternoon, right? It's packed, and it's all kinds of conversation that is happening. The only thing that's different is the preconceived notions that we put on this subject matter, how we shy away in fear of how someone may not agree with us, right? When we don't do that in other circles, like, we welcome that challenge, especially in our community. Like we are always ready up for some sort of debate, and so we shouldn't shy away from this topic, right? We should talk about it, not to going to have a rally or a march or something like that, but with our friends and families, with the people that live next door to us, that the people who you don't have this conversation with, to say, this is what I'm thinking about.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I guess I'll just add to that. I think there are people already speaking out. Lots of folks are speaking out. And so my question is, what's my role in joining them, supporting them, uplifting them, amplifying it? Because sometimes I think, to Tanya's point, thinking it needs to be more complicated than it is, but also thinking that you have to be the one to lead it. You got to be the first to do it. You got to, you know what I mean? You got to take up the most space. And my attitude is, there are people doing this work and doing it really well, better than I could. So rather than trying to take that, how do I amplify that, share that, get more folks, get more attention to them, and have more folks join these conversations? The getting started and feeling like you have to be the one can actually just be a really big barrier to a lot of folks, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, they got it, cool, I'll share, I'll support you right on, and that's valuable too. That's valuable too.
Yeah, and if I could just carry on to that, and maybe it's going to be another question, but Allison, you hit on a perfect point. I think that it takes a degree of just knowing yourself and knowing the kind of person you are. Not everyone is the leader who's going to be the one to speak out. Some people are amazing writers. Some people are amazing listeners. Some people can see the systems and architect new realities. So reflect on your own goals and strengths and passions in your network. Are you just extremely plugged? Do you know a ton of people? Can you make the connections? What's your role to play in this? And all of us, everyone on this call and everyone listening to this call, has a different role to play, I guarantee it.
Wow. There's another question here that I think also applies to the three of you. And it's from Brian. How do we help the community move from a capitalist mindset to a cooperative mindset to build the future that y'all are talking about?
My gut is always to show them. Someone said this a few times today, that the future is now. I think part of getting folks to see it is to let them know that it's not that far away, that there's a tendency to think that there's, I think what I've noticed is the idea that it's so far away. We have no idea what to do. We have no idea what we want, that we need to study it more, get more people to look at it, get more. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that there's no place for that, but I do sometimes think that that part of getting folks to look beyond individual things is to show them examples of it. Show them examples of cooperative economics. Show them, introduce them to folks who have been doing this kind of work, because that takes, at least for me, it took off a lot of this sense of, oh my God, wow, I'm trying to get rid of banks. Is that what I'm doing? You know what I mean? And again, there's a role for this sort of stuff. I'm not trying to downplay or dismiss it, but sometimes so much of it is just seeing what's possible by looking. And I would say we can also, yes, we can look within our communities. We can look, outside of the country. You know what I mean? We can just sort of expose ourselves to different ways of doing things, because they exist right now. They're existing right now in this moment. And so the trick is, how do we get them more attention and have that maybe at times be the default of how we think, rather than adding it on. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to add this quote from sister activist Professor Angela Davis, and she said that racism is intrinsic to capitalist social relations, and that one will not be abolished without the other. And so, this won't come as a surprise to anybody, being that I'm with the National Black Worker Center, but we say, we need to end racism.
Mic drop.
There was a good question for Lawrence that I think that I'm just like really interested in hearing more from you, Lawrence, about how to move companies from just creating diversity, equity, and inclusion working groups to taking meaningful action.
Yeah, and the way forward is first convincing people that, and it's the refrain that we say all the time, systemic problems require systemic solutions. You cannot annex a part of your company to address some systemic problem. You are systematically setting them up for failure. So if you take that assumption and then say, all right, I need to now, this is a bigger transformation. It requires everyone's buy-in. It requires collective action from everyone. What is my part of this bigger machine? Then it moves the conversation, and it's not just, I've been saying increasingly this like box checker mentality. We have the Black Diversity and Inclusion Officer check. They're going to have that figured out. It's like, no, man, you're going to have to, that's the flower, if you will. Now you have to tend to the soil around them and give them that successful environment. And, you know, I keep going back to the achieving equity in tech because it gets into the very tangible asks, but that's the conceptual answer of it can't just be an individual, it can't just be a department. And the quicker that we can come to terms with that and say, all right, there is a shared responsibility among all of us, the more constructive any subsequent conversation will be. And then there are very discrete asks that are probably easier read than just me reading them out to you.
I have a question for Tanya that it had me thinking throughout the whole conversation about involving the youth. How are you doing it, and are you intentionally focusing on mobilizing young folks?
Yeah, I think so. One, yes, we are intentional about mobilizing and organizing youth because they are future workers and they are current workers, especially if you are a youth of color, right? That you're already working a job by the time you are 14 or 14 or 15. One of the things that we learned early on, we did a listening tour. We were surprised to find out how many young workers were not able to define the racism that they were experiencing in the workplace. The other thing that we learned is how they personalized it and thought that it was me, right? If only I ran faster, jumped higher, flew, soared something through the sky, right? I would not experience that. And that's problematic, right? And I think it's definitely connected to the lack of education around race and racism in this country and the unwillingness to talk about the experiences of Black people in this country, right? That it's just regulated to the month of February like we're having now. But when we do that, we do our youth a disservice because we don't prepare them for the workplace. And so if you go back and think about your first job, what was it that you were told and who told it to you, right? So I think about me, it was my mother. She was like, keep your mouth shut and your head down and you're gonna get fired, right? That's the only preparation that we give people when they are going to work. And as Black people, we need more than that. And so it's key for the National Black Worker Center and Black Worker Centers to work with young people so that they can exercise their rights. And that's part of, Marley, what I was speaking about earlier about like, when do you find your voice? When do you express your leadership? Like what my mom said to me when I first started working, one, because she knows me and she knows my mouth, and I probably would have got fired from just mouthing off, but also, right, we're teaching people to silence themselves, to not bring their whole selves to their work. And when you do that, we lose, right? And so we can't afford to keep losing. We have to win. And winning for us means that you are authentically yourselves, that we don't say to people, that there's something wrong with being Black in the workplace, right? Because that means that you're saying there's something wrong with you. And so that's part of, what we have, the retraining that needs to occur with our young people so that we give them the tools to lead and to soar.
That piece around there's nothing wrong with being Black in the workplace is so deep. We don't even have time to really piece that, but that's amazing. That's bars. Thank you so much.
There's a question about the surveillance of Black workers that I'm just curious if folks have, like any insight on that. And I can read the question from the chat. How are we, or can we address the dwindling access to privacy and the over surveillance of our people, especially Black workers, that we are seeing from tech?
I feel like that question is aimed at me, so I'll jump on it. So it's a two-part one. So how can we, and for that one, I'll just say straight up, I don't know. That's not my area of expertise by any means, but I feel like that illuminates the path to can we, and I think that was the second part of the question. And I think that just knowledge is power. I think that being able to speak precisely and being able to diagnose the problem is the first part. Clearly, you can't begin to solve something. I don't know the different nuances of the problem, so I don't know how to begin to solve it, but it is an important one. And I think, and I expect that when the bigger wave, and I think that it'll be, progress is sometimes slower than a lot of people would like, myself included, but in that wave, when we start to unearth all of the ills and the grimy stuff that sits beneath the surface that's perpetuating inequity, that'll come out and that'll get ripped out for the weeds that it is. So that's, I can't speak too precisely to it because I don't know what it is, but I believe that once you start digging around underneath the hood, it's going to come up and get addressed. Maybe that's naivety that the arc bends towards justice, but that's my guess.
I have this question that I think Allison will have some beautiful words. I think everybody will have beautiful things to say, but you talk about the importance of having of building community power when it comes to wealth, when it comes to building wealth, when it comes to the economy of the community. So like, how important do you think it is to have that community involved in creating the policy to build this future that we're talking about?
Oh yeah, critical. And it's actually a new area of work for Common Future as well, because we witnessed that firsthand last year when folks are trying to figure out how to support businesses, how to support communities in the middle of COVID and businesses shutting down and all this stuff. And they were not talking to the folks they needed to talk to when crafting these policies or making these solutions. And so it is actually, you need both. We need that political and that economic power. They need to happen in tandem. And so part of it is we're on our own. I mean, one of the things we always think is show, not tell. And so we want to, what does it look like for us to craft a policy practice that's inclusive? So we experimented with that last year. We'll actually be sharing some of our insights over the next couple of days, but we witnessed that exclusion. And we were like, what does it look like to have inclusive policy practices? Well, first of all, we identified community leaders. We paid them for their time. You know what I mean? That's one thing that happens a lot with nonprofits in particular, but like Black leaders, women of color, like we are asked for our insights all the time to give feedback or whatever it might be, but we do not compensate people for that. And I think first of all, that's equitable. You need to pay, if you're looking at them as experts, pay them for their time as experts. That's the first thing. But the other thing is it makes it so that more people can actually participate because they don't have to take time off work or they have to avoid responsibilities and stuff like that. And so part of that inclusive practice is creating the space, creating the opportunities for them to share their ideas, and then consistently getting feedback from them every single step of the way. So I'm so glad you asked that question. I don't know if I told you we were doing that, but you teed us up real nice, Marley. We're gonna stay tuned. We're gonna be rolling some stuff out over the next couple of days about what we learned last year and what's to come. So I appreciate that.
Just one more time for showing and not telling.
Yes.
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 Yes, yes, yes.
I think we're almost at time.
I think we could do one more.
You could do one more. Just one.
Okay.
Let's do one more.
There's one about what's your call to action, Tanya?
So the call to action is to mobilize, to speak up, and to become trained, right? And so the powers and the forces that are working against us are they're organized. They have a 25-year plan. We can't live day by day, week by week, moment by moment, right? We've got to think for the long haul and thinking about what do we want 25 years to look like from now. You know, when we think about our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, what are we leaving them? And what tools can we provide them so that they are able to stand on our shoulders and reach heights that we never could have imagined possible. And so that means that we need to take time to strategize and to plan. The last thing that I would offer is something that we've been just started discussing last year at the National Black Worker Center, and that is claiming your space and your time by resting. Historically, we did not have the ability to stop work, right? We did not have the ability to rest and take time to nourish our bodies, our minds, and our souls. And so part of our liberation is taking time that we need to rest, right? To feed our mind, to feed our soul, to stop and to plan. We get so caught up in, especially during this COVID moment, if I'm not working, if I'm not doing 15 different things, that I'm lazy. That's a stereotype that has been put on us. We have, as Black people, have been called lazy from the time we were enslaved in this country. As we were having whips cracked over our backs and doing work, we were called lazy. So let's reclaim and liberate ourselves to say that we need to take time to rest, to strategize, and to plan. I think that's when we are able to create and build the world that we all want to exist in. And we can't do that if we're just constantly going. So my words would be to take time to rest and to think and to plan and to strategize and then act out on those plans and strategies.
That is speaking to me. That is speaking to me. And I think, that's a good place. That's a good place to stop, at least for this beginning. I'll pass it to you, Layla.
Wow, y'all. This was absolutely amazing. I'm just like overflowing with gratitude. This is going to sit with me for a very long time. So thank you so much to the panelists. Tanya Wallace-Goburn, Executive Director of the National Black Worker Center, Lawrence Humphrey, tech worker and founder of Tech Can Do Better, and Allison Jones, Vice President of Brand and Storytelling. Thanks y'all to participants for contributing to this absolutely amazing conversation, giving us the most delicious questions. This was truly amazing. Is there anything you want to add, Courtney, in that piece?
No, I just thank you to our whole team as well. We are so excited. This is such an opportunity for us to peel back the curtain, as Layla said, on the brilliance that we're experiencing in our relationships and the work that we are doing to make this world more just and this economy more equitable. So this is just thank you to the team too.
Yes, to our team, because you see us and you see the panelists, but I mean, legit, it's pretty much whole coworker team, hands on deck supporting this right now, which is just really beautiful and amazing. So, so y'all are there's a couple things.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Layla. A couple more things.
No, go ahead, say it, fam. Listen.
Well, no. So we're gonna send out a follow-up email, of course. so that you can stay connected. There were a lot of questions in the chat. How do I, and y'all were dropping links and y'all are bomb. Shout out to y'all in this chat and all these wonderful questions. But we are sending a follow-up email so you can stay connected to these beautiful people and the work that they are doing, as well as stay connected to us, because this is just the beginning and we're excited to keep talking and to keep working. But that's not all.
Yes. So you're going to receive an email with everyone's handles to follow on social media, but also more importantly, there's going to be a very clear action step for you to take. One of them is the Workplace Anti-Racism Survey from the National Black Worker Center, which was constructed to support in identifying where and how racism is showing up in the workplace for Black folks. So definitely look out for that survey.
Yeah, that survey is literally when you hit leave this Zoom, that survey is going to pop up. And if you are a Black person working anywhere, please fill out that survey. This work can't go forward without the data. We need the data. And you're also in the follow-up email going to get an opportunity to sign the proposal that Lawrence was talking about around getting some equitable legislation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that'll be in the email too. But this is the end. So we just want to reintroduce ourselves one more time in case you forgot. I'm Courtney Malone, and I'm a director of leadership development at coworker.org.
I'm Layla Noor, and I'm the senior campaign strategist at coworker.org.
Marley Pulido, director of worker resources and training at coworker.org.
And Coworker is a multiracial, digital-first organization fighting for collective liberation within the workplace. We're super grateful for y'all. And I'm going to pass it to Courtney one last time to go ahead and close us out.
It's an honor to celebrate Black History Month with our amazing panel, with our amazing staff, and with all of you who are watching. We are so grateful for this opportunity to showcase a little bit of this brilliance. And what we're really excited about is what's to come. Forget that the future is right now. So we're making actionable all of the things that we are talking about every single moment. So look forward to you taking your rest, but also taking some action. So we will see you soon. Peace, y'all.
Peace, y'all.
I'ma push me, I'm at